by the way.
Thank you. I want to welcome everybody who's joined the recording. My name is Brandon. And so when Jesus went and said to his disciples, I'm going to be gone, he said to his disciples, hey, you guys aren't going to be able to accomplish as much now that I'm gone. And he didn't say that, did he? He says, I actually believe you're going to do greater things. He said, greater things. And greater things is a heart. It's an absolute strategy that we have for the next wave. That when we talk with next wave leaders, we're not saying, hey, one day maybe you'll almost be as good as I am. Have you ever noticed they don't want to stay in your church very long if they feel that? There's a lot of things that we didn't do right. There's a lot of things that we struggle with as a church. I remember I was at a church, and when I got hired at this church, they were dumping a ton of money into youth ministry. And so they had hired a friend. That friend hired me. And so they had 2 youth pastors, not 1, and they're staffing it and they're growing it. And I was on the board meetings. And I noticed one by one that this church, each one of the board members' kids graduated. In fact, I helped graduate, baptize, was a part of all of their kids finding and knowing Jesus. And as I was there during that season, I realized this church is aging. Have you ever noticed we age? We grow up, even if we don't want to. Some of it we're trying really hard not to. And as I grew up, I noticed the funding for youth ministry shrank every year that a board member's kids graduated. I don't think they did anything intentional, and I would say it's a tension that we all live in, we all face. A long time ago, we said that at the very heart of this movement, it's going to be our youth, our next generation, the next wave. We want to see greater things for them. Greater things help keeps us young. And I don't think it's actually a strategy for how you reach young people, by the way. I actually think when you reach young people, what happens is you also reach seniors. One of the most powerful stories in the last 2 years on Bainbridge Island, the campus that I lead, is the story of Mauricio. Mauricio is a 17-year-old boy, and his dad had left, his mom was a single mom, and his grandma paid for him to go to summer camp. And so one year he went to summer camp because grandma paid and made him go. And if he was here, he would tell you the story, and he's actually told the story at our church. He says, when grandma tells you to do something, you do it. And here's what's funny. Grandma didn't go to church. Grandma wasn't baptized. So Mauricio went to summer camp, absolutely transformed by the power of Jesus, came home, got baptized, invited his whole family. They had a huge family on the island. They had 12 people come to watch Mauricio get baptized. A year later, Mauricio baptized his grandma. A year after that, his grandma passed away from cancer. His grandpa is now a major part of our church. He's 71 years old. Couldn't be more vibrant, more excited to come to church. He's given to the training center, making things happen. And I'm walking through his life because he's got cancer. He's found Jesus. His relatives have found Jesus. At the memorial, I had a chance to share to that whole family, and they talked about what Christ has done in their life through the power of Jesus. And it started with a 17-year-old boy who found Jesus. And so I think sometimes when we talk about next wave, we can feel like we're leaving people out. And I actually think that that next wave is a catalyst for every generation. So every one of us care about our kids and our grandkids. And so Jesus laid out a big vision, and it starts with attracting young leaders. And so, in this, we asked this question, who are some of the young leaders that Jesus is sending us? I remember when Wes invited me to be a part of New Life. He asked me this question, are you on the mission with Jesus? And I had been a pastor for 10 years at the time. I said, well, what does it mean to be on the mission? He actually gave me a list of 7 things. Some of the things on the list were like talking to people who don't go to the church. And I went and I told my wife, who was 2 weeks from giving birth, Janine, I don't think I'm on the mission with Jesus. She goes, you have to be, you're a pastor. And I said, I know, that's what the worst part. And I said, I think the Lord's leading us to move to New Life and be a part of this new church and launch their youth ministry and work with Wes. She says, I'm about to have a baby. You never tell a pregnant woman we're going to move. I didn't know that then. I didn't know that. And so 2 weeks after we gave birth, I literally loaded up a U-Haul and moved to New Life in Kitsap County. And I actually drove to Wes's house because I had nowhere to live with a U-Haul. And Wes looked at me like, are you here? And I'm like, yeah, I don't know where I'm going to live, so I just thought I'd live with you for now. And so he goes, well, you can live here this week because we're going on vacation. His wife said to him in the car, you better find a house for Brandon before I get home from that vacation. One of the apprentices I had at the time was this 18-year-old kid. His name was Mark Middleton. And he was planning to be a part of my internship, except for Wes hired me away. And so I said to him, I said, hey, I'm not going to be able to do an internship with you this year because I'm going to be in Kitsap. I said, but if you want to do it there, you could do it there with me. And I remember sitting with him, and I handed him the book Barbarian Way. And it's a book by Erwin McManus. And I thought, this is a small enough book that I think an 18-year-old could read it. And in there, it talks about who was the first person to ever eat a mushroom, and why would they ever do that? And don't some mushrooms kill you? And is that a good idea? And so I handed Mark the book at 18 years old, and I said, do you want to be a mushroom eater, or do you want to stay home with your mom? I think sometimes you got to dare people to do something. And so Mark actually moved over. I said, but you can't move over with me. You have to move over because it's your decision. I said, so I'm moving over now. You can move over in 3 months if you still feel like it's a good idea. So 3 months later, sure enough, Mark moves over. He moves over with 3 people. They become our first year apprentices. Over those next 3 or 4 years, Mark goes to college, gets his degree, and jumps on as my youth pastor. During that period of time, worked with us for a while, and then the Lord led Mark at, how old was Mark? I don't even know, 26, 27 years old, to launch the East Bremerton campus and to start that campus and get it going. And launched it. The campus, I think, had just a monster launch. It grew very big. And after leading that campus for how long? How long did he lead it about?
3 or 4 years.
3 or 4 years. The Lord's now leading him to go back home on a 10-year journey and launch a church in Tri-Cities, the church he's grown up in. And it's just absolutely amazing to see what's happened over the last 10 or 11 years. But it started with this question of, will you be a mushroom eater? I think one of the things we have to do is we have to lay out a big vision for our leaders. And I have just a few things here that you can write down on what it looks like to attract young leaders. One of the first things you have to do is you have to attract them with a big vision. I think sometimes we think a big vision is, hey, you have this huge opportunity. I think sometimes a big vision is just to be on the mission with Jesus. When you read the Gospels, you'll see there's 2 big things in every one of the Gospels. There's the cross and the kingdom. The cross is this vision that Christ set out for your personal life and the transformation of it. You can be transformed into a new creation. I mean, could there be a bigger vision than that? And the kingdom is the vision that Christ sets out that we can do together. Here's how we can heal the world together. Here's the difference we can make. And we have a chance to offer people, I think, the biggest vision you could ever imagine. We can change the world together. At New Life, our heart is that we don't want to just get kids through high school. We want to raise world changers that can be a part of transforming the kingdom of God. The second thing that we need to attract young leaders is we need authenticity. You can write this down. We need authentic leaders. Students, they know when you're lying. And they need people that are broken and honest. My heart for this comes out of 1 John. It says, God is light. In him there is no darkness at all. The God we serve has a pure heart. He's right. He's honest. He's true. He is light. Here's the thing. We're not light. And we make a big mistake when we hold ourselves out to leaders as we're just like God. We got all the light. They actually need to see the cracks in your armor. They need to see how you wrestle with the darkness in your soul. And we need to teach them how to walk through those things. What happens is we create secrecy when we don't create the kind of ministries that allow people to share where they're broken. And so the more we can tell stories of failure, the more we can tell stories about where we don't have it figured out, the more we can sit in staff meetings and say, I don't actually know what to do, what's next. I need your help. Actually allows them to see who you really are, and it helps you to actually attract more people. Hypocrisy is when we start saying the gospel of you should. Right? Whenever you're preaching and you say, here's what you should do, what that person is saying, here's something you should do that I'm not planning to do. We can't ask our leaders to do something that we're not willing to do. It would have been weird for me to look at Mark and say, you know what, Mark, you should do? You should move to Kitsap. What are you going to do? Well, I'm going to stay here in my house that I have with my wife, and but you should really be a mushroom eater. You would do great at it. No, we have to do it. We have to do what we do. The third thing is this: we have to call them to a better story. And calling someone to a better story isn't about even telling a better story, I don't think. It isn't about making your story bigger. It's actually letting them be a part of the story. I think sometimes young leaders leave our church because they think, well, that's your story. I got to go create my story. One of the things that we do that I think is actually an odd practice of New Life is we have different groups of people always in our senior team member meetings. Like any of the lead meetings that we have, our directional team meetings, it's amazing how many people end up showing up to them. You just think, why is an 18-year-old kid in the directional team meeting for New Life? Isn't this a pretty large, so we want them to know this is their church. We want to hear what they have to say. Their opinion matters. That they're a part of this story. A better story means they get to be a part of it. The fourth thing, real life change. We're going to look to tell stories of real life change, where people are finding Christ, telling stories. One of the things that you'll notice is as Wes began to share stories, he began to share stories about him and his neighbors. The powerful thing is as you share those stories, other people think, I should probably do that too. That must be what life on the mission looks like, doing these things that Wes is doing. And the impact happens over time when you realize there's 1,000 people doing that. That's where it starts. That's the simple vision that comes out. It's the stories of life change. The 5-1 is communitas. It's funny, I think this is important that I share because if he shared it, you wouldn't believe him. So Wes and I, we've been doing ministry for 10, 12 years together. We've known each other for 20 plus years.
You say that word again?
Communitas. As I'll unpack it.
Well,
so
it's a Latin phrase. Yeah, if you read Forgotten Ways, Alan Hirsch, it's in there. It's a bond that's forged through a shared ordeal. Community on steroids.
So yeah, it's what happens when you have mission and friendship at the same time. We were meeting with this team of people and they were asking us, so you have 6 campuses and how come none of them have gone sovereign? Doesn't that kind of happen? What aligns you guys? And they were they were critical at trying to figure out what's the trick? What's the thing? And we're sitting there in the discussion and they're trying to figure out what aligns you. And we actually gave them 3 or 4 answers, and we were trying to figure out, I don't know, what does align us? We don't even actually know. I mean, is it the mission? I mean, the scriptures, of course, yes, those are all important. Jesus, yeah, yes. Yeah, you can never beat that one. And one of the leaders says, love. It's love. It's actually the love that we have for one another. One of the things we did a year ago as a leads team, was it a year ago or was it 2 years now? It was 2 years. So we did a Spartan race together. And it was one of...
I don't recommend it.
It was my idea. I thought we should all do a Spartan race. And we did it no team member left behind ways. Some team members needed more help. Some people, struggled to get over certain walls, did more burpees than others. But I think sometimes those are the communitas moments that you need as a team so that when there are those hard discussions, when there's those tough moments, you actually have relationship to fall back on. We need to invite our young leaders into those communitas moments. We need to create those moments and spaces. It's amazing how much that helps us through the difficult moments of ministry. 6, courage. Matthew 6, 16, 18 says that gates of hell are actually pushing back on this movement. We're going to need courage. We're going to need challenge to go after this. There's got to be something inside of our heart that says, we will go first. We will take risks. I wanted you to hit this part is we've challenged some of our young leaders throughout the times to try and do something. One of the young leaders we challenged was a guy named Karsten and a team of people. And we just told them, and I think they were like in high school at the time, 19 years old, just out of high school, to launch a church. And so talk to us real quick. What happened? Like, how did that work?
Okay, well, we had a small group. I was meeting with 4 people. I tried to keep that practice. I'm always meeting with young leaders. And they said they wanted to plant a church. And so I said, go ahead. Like, seriously, anything Jesus told you to do, you have permission from me, okay? And so they're like, well, where do we start? And I was like, I don't know. You probably should, like, have a plan. Like, I don't know, a lot of people do a church planting prospectus, little, sheet of how you'd be organized, what you're trying to do, what's your vision, what needs are you meeting. So they came back, they did their homework, brought it back, and then they said, we think we need some money for this. I go, great, I'll match whatever money you come up with. So they raised $100, matched it, immediate match. And so then they launched their church, and didn't go as well as they were hoping, because they had a lot of stuff figured out. The only thing I think they were missing was people. So we met afterwards and we talked about that. Their biggest fight, their biggest tension was who was going to be in charge. That's what they fought about. And it was, so they really started to unpack, like, why did we fight? Because they fought about who's going to be in charge, and they got all their tasks done when they forgot to connect with any people. And it was fun to be able to do that because, like, man, it's like 7 years ago or so, and to watch where they are now. One is we have a campus in Bremerton now, and what's interesting is Karsten now leads all of our community groups across all campuses. And so I think sometimes we think of this as the way to success is a lot of small steps of success, and I'm just wondering, like, let's figure out a safe way. Like, in my head, I thought it was safe for them to fail in this, and sometimes you create an area where someone gets to fall down on a bicycle without having to go to the hospital. And because they're going to remember that. Because here's one of the things of this is, when people fail in our churches, because they fail and we fail, okay? But if we hide all of our failures and then they fail, sometimes they disappear. Because they don't think it's safe to fail and still be part of the church. And so if you can celebrate, like, somebody fails, and then you kind of like, and then you learn from it, that's going to attract a lot of people.
And so I think one of the things that actually creates the courage is creating a culture where people have permission to fail. Where you actually say, hey, you can try something, you can fall down, and you're still a part of this movement. You don't have to leave. You don't have to walk away in shame. And one of the best ways to do it is to actually tell your own stories. Here's how we failed. Well, we did that and it didn't work. We have an annual State of the Church where we meet, and in the early years, and we probably could do better at this practice now, but in the early years, one of the things we did is we'd actually have a time where we shared, here's the things we did right, and here's the things we did wrong. And we would tell the whole church every year, hey, so we did this. One time we tried to launch 3 campuses in the same month, and one of them survived. I mean, the other 2 just, honestly, they didn't work. And 1 out of 3. It's a good batting average. And, you just had to say, hey, that didn't work. It's amazing how refreshing it is when people hear that. So courage. A couple other quick things here, and I'll buzz through this next part. What pushes them away? Low expectations. I think when we feel like, hey, we're going to keep you at the kids' table, right? So we have to have high expectations. We got to be calling. When we're in meetings with people, when we're challenging people, we got to be calling them and believing for high things. So one of the best ways to have high expectations is to believe great things for them. So here's the signs of low expectations. You give away task and not authority. Here's like 10 things to do. You actually have to give them a position, a platform, a place of authority. The other thing, and this is a temptation for me, is to shield them from hardship. And I think there's a tendency that we have with young leaders is to want to rescue them. If you read the book Love and Logic, they talk about being a helicopter parent, that anytime something was hard. So there's actually moments where we need to let them fail. We need to allow them to have that conversation and ask them, hey, what did you learn from that? How come that didn't work? And sometimes it can be really hard because sometimes the failures are big and they're tough and people email us and call us about them. But that's okay. The other thing is this, is there is no room for young leaders to fail. We've been talking about that. The next one is this, is young leaders are not allowed to dream out loud. One of the big things that we do when we plant campuses is we ask God to send us called leaders, and then the called leader tells us where they're going to plant. And that's sometimes different because sometimes we have like, here's our dream for where we'd like you to plant. But we actually have to realize that the Lord is speaking to each one of our young leaders, and we need to hear their dreams, honor their dreams, and then be a part of making their dreams happen. With your young leaders, you can either fight them or fund them. I think one of the best things you can do is you can fund their dreams and watch what God does. One of the things that Wes and I always say is our goal in life is to be old elephants. And if you've ever studied anything on safari, one of the things that they'll do is they'll take old elephants and they'll put them in rooms with young elephants, and the old elephants keep the young elephants from killing each other. And so one of the things that Wes and I'll do is we still go to most of the youth ministry gatherings that happen, but we have to stand in the back now because when we preach, it feels like Dad's preaching in the room. You know, it's not as a good thing as it used to be. It's still hard for you to accept, right? Yeah. So our dream in life is just to be old elephants, to watch what God's doing. The second thing, and it has actually marked 3 on your card there, but it's the second thing. It says it's control. And this is things that push people away. It's control. And one of the things that we say pretty regularly is this, is you can either have growth or control, but you can't have both. And so we have to create space for young leaders. One of the ways to create space is to figure out, here's a position, authority, something that I'm doing that I'm not going to be able to do anymore because we need to create space for this person to lead. When you create space, here's what happens. It grows people. A couple ways that we make space, and this has to do the next 2, and you were going to help me with this part, is I want you to talk to them about ceilings and walls. Okay? So,
I can do it quick.
Yep.
Okay, so just real quick. A ceiling is so how high could someone rise in your organization with you still there? So, I was talking with a pastor. He's a great pastor. He had a great young leader he was working with, and he said to me, Wes, this guy's so good. One day, I think he could grow up and be my number 2. So it was interesting as the young leader didn't stay. So Jesus somehow thought all of his disciples, isn't this crazy, would do great. He said, my disciples, John 14:12, will do the same things I'm doing and even greater works because I'm going to be with the Father. So how can we create an environment where the next wave is thinking we've been invested into, and in humility, focused on Christ, believe we're going to be able to do more. We're going to do twice as much because this generation believes in us that much, and we've been set up and apprenticed for that. So it's about ceilings. So I think we have to think about how do we raise ceilings in our organizations. The other is walls. And so walls are good because if you just had no walls, you're just we need some walls because there needs to be some rooms to talk in. Okay? But we need to think in terms of this is how do we create spaces where we remove certain barriers from people having input. So for example, the craziest thing to me is if you get let's take 7 pastors or 8 staff members, go away on a retreat some way away from the culture and then come up with a plan on how to reach the culture for Christmas. I just think that's going to be hard. Okay? All right? Because, it's the intelligence is at the leaves. So it might be more interesting to take that same retreat time and go and interview people in the community and ask the question of, hey, what do you think is going to reach people like you at Christmas? Does that make sense? So young people know how to reach young people. Seniors are going to be the best people to tell you, here's how you reach seniors. Here's what we're thinking and feeling. And so if in our meetings we only have the same people, so I want to get practical about this. You're going to have a base group that's going to be probably consistent whatever meeting group you're in. So when you first start, you're going to be a really small team, like you're golfing. Then you'll become a basketball team, okay, a team of 5 or so. At some point, you have to move to a football team where you're going to have different teams of teams. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, in your teams of teams, you're going to do some things where you have a base group, but you then will bring in somebody for a meeting or a series of meetings. Hey, they're going to be here the next 3 weeks and help us as we think about blank. And so when somebody asked me, I was talking to one of my mentors. He's an amazing church. I said, hey, who do you have in what meeting? And he says, whoever I need. So you have permission to bring into rooms. And so am I the only one? I grew up in a family where there was an adult table and a kid's table for Thanksgiving. And so like when I was 8, we would sit there, and then 10, I'd sit there. Okay, we were the youngest of all the cousins. At 24, I was still at the kids' table. Like, I don't even fit. Okay, at some point, you can't have the kids' table there, guys. And we have to bring people in. And I know when we say, hey, give them authority, and you're like, I don't know if I can, because I just don't know, like, if you're giving that away, what about responsibility? If you put them at the adult table, they're going to feel the weight of responsibility that they need to feel to have the authority that you just gave them.
And what happens is they begin asking better questions because they feel that weight. The last thing is coaching. And coaching is one of the things that we need for apprenticeship. And what you'll actually notice is, if you have a young child, it's a little child, what a little child, like say like 3rd grade and down, they actually need control. You're not like handing them the keys to the car. Like, hey, go ahead, drive the car. We want to give you permission. No, you do that to a 3rd grader and they're going to get hurt, right? So little kids need control, but as we grow up in our parenting skills, then what happens is then there's a moment where they need coaching. Right now I have a 15-and-a-half-year-old, and he's learning how to drive a stick. And so it's really exciting and super scary all at once for me, because now I'm sitting in the passenger seat. Okay, now before this moment, he needed me to be the driver in control. And now I'm in this really weird phase where I'm in the passenger seat and he's the driver, and now I have to use words to explain to him how to make this work and not yell or scream or cry all at once. Some of you are ahead of me. You've already gone through this phase. And it's so fun to watch these moments when he gets it. With our leaders, here's what you'll know. You'll be able to attract certain levels of leaders based on how you apprentice them. So if the only way you know how to apprentice them is to control them, you're always going to have a low level of leader that's younger than you. When you learn how to coach them, here's what happens. You'll have better leaders. So actually, after coaching, here's the next phase. You become their cheerleader. Cheerleading is actually a huge part. There's something that happens when you start telling a leader, I'm cheering for you. I'm believing for you. Here's this. You give less advice during this phase. I had a young leader afterwards that I'd been coaching for a couple of years as a communicator. And one time we came off the stage and he just did an outstanding job. And he had been trained. He says, what can I do better? I looked at him and I said, nothing. Nothing. You did outstanding. I said, anything I could ever give you in advice, it'd be like, how do you take a 9.9 and make it a 10? Like, I just wouldn't even know what to tell you. I said, how did I do? Like, you could feel this like balance, this shift that's happening. You become their cheerleader. And here's why that phase is so important, because here's as you send them out, if you were never their cheerleader, they won't come back to you. Like, why would I ever come back to anybody after I send them out? Because the final phase is this, it's consulting. You become their consultant. And people will come to you for consulting if they felt like there was a season in your life where you're their cheerleader. And here's what happens. When you become a consultant, here's what you're actually helping lead leaders that are actually better than you. They have areas and strengths that you'll never have. Abilities and things that they can accomplish. And for some reason, they'll still come to you. And the main thing they're coming for is cheerleading. They want to know that you believe in them, that you're proud of them, that you're going after them. So that's how you develop and create that movement.